There are moments that split your life into before and after. For me, it was the sound of laughter through a bathroom door. Not just any laughter, his laugh. The kind I'd know even in my sleep. The laugh of Caleb Donovan, my best friend since the 5th grade. The man who gave the best man speech at my wedding. And it was coming from my bathroom while my wife, Elise, was supposed to be home alone. I stood frozen in the hallway, holding a grocery bag in one hand and my breath in the other. Elise emerged a moment later, wrapped in a towel, her hair damp. She flinched when she saw me. "You're home early," she said, too quickly. I forced a smile. "Forgot my wallet." She stepped aside. "I was just showering." I glanced toward the slightly ajar door. No one there. But the window was open. Caleb's laugh had faded, but it echoed in my head like a loop. That was the beginning. Not the affair itself. No, that had started long before. But it was the moment my gut finally refused to stay silent. That night, I searched her phone while she slept. Nothing. She was careful. Too careful. But one thing slipped. A single text from a contact named Julian. "Same time tomorrow?" That was all it took. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. I played the game she thought she'd mastered. I took late meetings that didn't exist. I left the house earlier than needed and circled the block to watch. And every time, like clockwork, he showed up. Caleb. Same hoodie. Same smug swagger. Let himself in with the key we gave him. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Watching a play where I used to be the lead and was now just an understudy, forgotten in the wings. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the familiarity. The way she looked at him. The way she laughed. It wasn't just sex. It was us, recreated with someone else. And I couldn't understand how she managed to lie so convincingly, to kiss me goodnight and whisper love into my ear after sharing our bed with him hours before. I started documenting everything. Dates. Times. Photos. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet. But I knew this wasn't going to end with an argument or a tearful apology. No, this would end when I said it did. I stopped sleeping. Nights became long hours of planning, remembering, rewinding everything she'd ever said with new, brutal clarity. Elise was a master of detail. She never came home smelling like him. She never slipped up in her stories. But once you know the truth, even silence starts to sound like a confession. I kept watching. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Caleb arrived at 11:05 a.m. and left just before 1 p.m. Elise would shower right after. She always texted me around 1:30, a sweet message asking how my day was going. I'd respond with emojis and lies of my own. Busy. Love you. We both became strangers in matching rings. My brother, Mason, noticed something was off. We'd always been close, and he saw through my forced smiles during Sunday dinners. I didn't tell him, not yet, but I asked him questions about Caleb. "You think he's loyal?" I said, pouring us a drink. He looked at me for a beat too long. "Why?" "Just curious." "Loyal to himself," he muttered. That answer told me more than I expected. Elise and Caleb weren't hiding well. I had just been blind. I remembered Mason warning me years ago, when Caleb made a joke at our rehearsal dinner about sharing everything. I thought it was harmless. Now I realized it was a breadcrumb, one of many I'd ignored. I dug deeper. Hired a PI, someone completely off the radar. No mutuals. No risk. He was efficient. Within 5 days, I had time-stamped photos, audio from a discreet device planted near our home side entrance, even a video, Caleb entering with a bottle of wine, Elise greeting him in lingerie. That video broke something in me. Not from the sight itself, but from the laughter. Her laugh. That sound used to be my favorite melody. Now it was a knife. I copied everything to a flash drive. I labeled it in case I forget, because I knew how easily abusers gaslight the truth. And I had started to feel like the victim of a crime no one else could see. Elise was still sweet, still careful, still mine, in public, but I had already buried the version of her I loved. I wasn't grieving her loss. I was studying the ruins. The question now wasn't if I would confront them. It was how and when. The day I decided to make my move, I woke up with an unnatural calm. Elise was already up, humming in the kitchen as if her world wasn't dripping poison into mine. "I'm meeting Claire for lunch," she said. I nodded. Lie number 1. Claire had moved to Texas 3 months ago. I didn't even blink. Tell her I said hi. Lie number 2. I had nothing to say to a ghost. As she left, I followed, 2 cars back, windows up. She wasn't headed to any restaurant. She parked in a quiet cul-de-sac and walked straight into Caleb's townhouse like she owned it. No hesitation. No knock. I didn't wait. I drove off and texted Mason. "Need to talk." "Just you. Today." He replied instantly. "Say when." We met at a bar we used to go to in college, one of those dim places that reeked of old beer and regret. I told him everything. He didn't speak until I finished. Then he exhaled and said, "I'm not even surprised. Caleb always wanted what he couldn't have. And you, well, you had everything." I looked down at my glass. I want to destroy them, Mason, but not in some soap opera scene. I want it to hurt. Quietly. Permanently. He leaned forward. "Then you have to let her keep thinking you don't know. I've already waited too long." "Exactly. What's a little longer?" That night, I went home to Elise's lips pressed to mine like a seal over a lie. "Claire says hi," she whispered, curling into my side. I kissed her forehead and stared at the ceiling for hours. Over the next week, I orchestrated the unraveling of their lives. I made quiet visits to Caleb's boss, an old client of mine from a marketing firm. I casually dropped hints about his side distractions during work hours. I knew Caleb had been late on projects. I made sure his mistakes looked deliberate. I forwarded Elise's false lunch receipts to our shared financial planner, asking him to flag oddities. I asked our cleaning lady to photograph any new items that appeared in the house: jewelry, gifts, clothing. Slowly, I collected not just evidence, but leverage. I wasn't going to explode this bomb. I was going to hand it to them, pull the pin, and watch them fumble as it ticked in their hands. Elise still smiled, still wore her ring, still asked about my day like she cared. But her silence was borrowed time, and I was counting down. The more lies Elise told, the easier it became to study her like a subject under glass. I knew her patterns now, how she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she lied, how she avoided eye contact only when she was deeply guilty. Every move she made screen scripted. Caleb, on the other hand, was unraveling. My quiet sabotage at his job had taken root. Mason confirmed that Caleb had been placed on a performance review. His boss said something about losing focus, Mason reported, trying not to smile. Apparently, he's been showing up late. Distracted. Sloppy work. I grinned. He's nervous. He should be. But Elise still floated through our home like nothing was wrong. She had grown bolder, even affectionate, kissing me goodbye in the mornings, initiating sex again, complimenting my cologne like she was trying to win me all over. I knew why. Guilt. Guilt often makes people cling harder to the very thing they're betraying. But I didn't flinch. I returned every gesture, matched her warmth, played the part of the devoted, unsuspecting husband. Because the closer I kept her, the sharper the fall would be. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Our 10th wedding anniversary. Elise had been planning a weekend getaway for us, but I already knew what she was really arranging: an overnight stay with Caleb in Aspen. The reservation confirmation hit our joint email by mistake. She quickly deleted it, but not before I saw the subject line: romantic stay for two. I didn't confront her. Instead, I made my own reservation at a different resort in Aspen. I drive up separately and arrive a day early. I enlisted Mason to coordinate timing. We had a plan. Elise packed a bag and told me she was leaving early to check in and relax before I arrive. I smiled. "Drive safe, babe." That afternoon, I followed. Quietly, patiently, I watched her check into the resort with Caleb. Same laugh, same hand on his chest, same body language she used to use with me. They thought they were invisible, but I was everywhere they didn't look. That night, I sat in my car with binoculars, camera, and audio recorder. I didn't need to catch them in the act. I just needed their faces. The intimacy. The betrayal in motion. It would be enough. More than enough. And I knew exactly what I'd do with it. The stage was almost set. The curtain would rise soon. And they had no idea they were the stars of their own downfall. I spent that night in the parking lot of a nearby lodge, camera resting in my lap, watching the video on loop. Elise and Caleb, laughing over wine in the lobby, his hand resting on her thigh like it belonged there, her head tilting back in the kind of smile she used to reserve for me. They weren't even cautious. That was the insult beneath the injury. They believed I was too blind or too trusting to ever see the truth. The next morning, I drove back down the mountain with every file backed up twice. Flash drive. Cloud. Email drafts. Nothing would be left to chance. Once home, I greeted Elise with open arms, even brought her flowers. "Sorry I couldn't make it," I said, kissing her forehead. "Work emergency." "Did you have fun?" She lied with her eyes, not just her mouth. "It was peaceful. I missed you." I smiled and whispered, "I missed you too." Over the next few days, I worked like a ghost, invisible and meticulous. I made copies of the video, cut short clips for emphasis, added dates and timestamps. Mason helped build a simple, private web page to host it all, password protected, untraceable to me. A digital time bomb. Meanwhile, Elise became warmer, sweeter. She cooked dinner twice that week, something she hadn't done in months. Let's do more date nights, she offered. I feel like we're reconnecting. I nodded, hiding the storm behind my teeth. That sounds perfect. Caleb was spiraling too. Mason said he'd started showing up at the gym less, skipping pickup basketball with the guys, getting snappy at mutual friends. That was good. Cracks were forming. The next step was precise and public. I set the date, Elise's company's quarterly dinner. A formal event. Big guest list. Executives. Spouses. Clients. I RSVP'd with her, bought a new suit, even had her help pick the tie. She chose a navy blue one, same color Caleb had worn in the video. Ironic. I spent the day before the dinner preparing. The webpage. The USB drives. A small stack of labeled envelopes. Each one marked with a name. Her boss, her HR director, her closest colleague. Just enough. Not overkill. I didn't want her destroyed. I wanted her exposed. I wanted the truth to slither out from behind her polished image and leave her standing in the wreckage she built. As she got ready that night, humming in the mirror, I stood behind her and whispered, "You look beautiful." She smiled. "You always know what to say. Only to people I trust," I replied softly. She didn't flinch. She didn't even catch it. And that made what came next feel even more deserved. The dinner was held at a rooftop event hall, glittering with fairy lights and soft jazz. The city skyline a backdrop that mocked the chaos brewing beneath my tuxedo. Elise looked stunning. Her golden hair curled just enough, lips painted in a shade she only wore when she wanted to be unforgettable. She clutched my arm as we walked in, smiling for photos, greeting colleagues. I knew all their names now. I had curated the list carefully. Every handshake, every smile was calculated. I wasn't her husband tonight. I was her executioner wearing a velvet mask. At 8:45 p.m., after the wine had warmed the room and Elise's laughter had rung out a few times too loud, I slipped away, into the coat room. From there, I pulled the envelopes from my jacket and placed them strategically, into purses, jacket pockets, folders left unattended on the check-in table. Each envelope contained a QR code. The code led to the site. The site led to the truth. Then I returned to her side, drink in hand. "Where were you?" she asked playfully. "Just getting some air. Everything okay?" "About to be." I kissed her cheek and clinked glasses with her, my eyes scanning the room for the first tremor. And there it was. A man by the bar, scanning his phone, stopping mid-sip. His brow furrowed. His eyes darted toward Elise. Then a woman near the buffet. Then another. The wave moved like a virus, silently infecting faces with confusion, shock, recognition. Elise kept sipping her champagne, oblivious. At 9:02, her phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. She reached into her clutch, glanced down, and froze. Her smile dropped an inch. She clicked. Her face paled. Her hand gripped my arm. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Nothing you didn't do first," I whispered. "Enjoy the spotlight." "You ruined me," she whispered, eyes glossy, mascara suddenly too dark. "No," I said calmly. "You did that all by yourself. I just handed out the program." She stormed out minutes later, heels clacking like war drums, phone clenched in a death grip. I stayed. I mingled. I smiled through the destruction. Let them see the one person who hadn't flinched, who hadn't lied. Caleb tried calling me that night. 3 times. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By morning, he'd be dealing with his own fallout. And Elise, well, her name would be attached to a scandal no amount of perfume or tears could clean. The affair was no longer a secret. The world knew. And the final act? That was still to come. Elise didn't come home that night. Her car never pulled into the driveway. Her side of the bed stayed untouched. But the silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It buzzed with the echo of collapse. By morning, the messages started. Texts, emails, voicemails. I didn't answer any of them. Not from her. Not from Caleb. Not from the coworkers who were now pretending to be shocked, appalled, confused. I let the chaos churn. I let them marinate in it. Around noon, Mason dropped by with coffee and a grin. "That was poetic," he said, collapsing onto the couch. "You're officially the ghostwriter of vengeance." "It's not over," I replied. "The affair's exposed." "Sure, but they haven't really felt it yet. You have more. I have everything." Elise's employer placed her on leave within 48 hours. Her boss, a notoriously old-school exec, didn't appreciate scandal, especially not when the firm had been considering her for a regional director promotion. Caleb's fallout was even messier. The marketing firm canned him. He was let go for professional misconduct and failure to disclose conflicts of interest. Apparently, someone anonymously forwarded a curated version of their romantic calendar and matched it to company hours. But I hadn't even touched the nuclear option yet. Not the one I'd been quietly crafting for weeks. Elise's family still didn't know. Her mother, uptight and obsessed with image, had always called me her best decision. I had a video ready, not explicit, but clear. A beautifully edited timeline of events, narrated by silence and timestamps, backed with soft piano music. Classy. Undeniable. I scheduled it to send through an anonymous Dropbox link to her mother, father, and sister. It was set to go out in 3 days. Why 3 days? Because I wanted to give Elise time to sit with her choices. Not just react. Feel. That evening, she showed up. No text. No warning. Just headlights on the driveway and her hesitant knock on the door. I opened it. She looked wrecked. No makeup, eyes swollen, hair pulled back in haste. "Please," she said, voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. Let her in. Watched her walk into the house like it was unfamiliar now. "I never meant for this to happen," she began. "I was lost. We were distant. I didn't know how to fix us." I said nothing. Just watched her crumble. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "I've humiliated myself." No," I interrupted. "You betrayed yourself. I just stopped hiding it for you." She sobbed. "On my floor. In my house. The house I built while she tore down everything inside it." And I stood there, unmoved. Because the worst part wasn't her tears. It was knowing she still hadn't felt the full weight of what she'd done. But she would. Very soon. Elise spent the night on the couch, curled into herself like a stranger in her own life. I left a blanket but didn't say a word. In the morning, she tried to speak again, but I walked past her like she was furniture, something once beautiful but now broken beyond use. She left shortly after, and the house exhaled without her. The silence was cleaner, more honest. That day, I activated Phase 2. While the fallout of the exposure still smoldered, I scheduled meetings, quiet ones, with people whose reputations mattered to Elise and Caleb. A former client of Caleb's owed me a favor. I arranged for him to lead a professional ethics committee review at an upcoming industry event. Caleb's name would come up purely by chance, and so would the videos. All of it shared as a case study on conflict of interest and reputation damage. It wouldn't make headlines, but it would spread slowly, behind closed doors where careers are made and ruined. Elise's family, meanwhile, received their Dropbox links right on schedule. I received no responses. No questions. Just silence, the kind that only comes when someone's image shatters and there's nothing left to defend. I imagined her mother clutching pearls, her father's jaw locking in disapproval. Elise tried calling again. I declined every time. Then Caleb showed up. He stood on my porch like a wet dog, sweating, pale, twitching like someone expecting to get punched. "We need to talk," he said. I stared at him, then opened the door wider. He stepped in. "I'm not here to fight," he blurted. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Elise said you guys were basically done." "Stop," I said. "You've always wanted what I had. But now you finally got it. And guess what? It's yours." She's not mine anymore," he muttered. "She's destroyed. I'm destroyed. Everyone's turned on us. You think that's the consequence?" I said, stepping closer. "You haven't even begun to pay. What do you want from me?" he asked, desperate now. I leaned in. "I want you to disappear. Quietly. If I ever hear your name tied to mine again, I will make sure every woman, every employer, every friend you've ever had sees what you really are. Do you understand me?" He nodded. No bravado left. No swagger. Just a shell. A coward in the skin of a man who thought betrayal came without cost. He left without another word. And for the first time, I felt something like peace. Not forgiveness. Not healing. Just space, clean, untouched space where the rot had been. I wasn't done yet, but I was finally building something new from the wreckage. And they wouldn't be part of it. Elise didn't reach out for 5 days. Not a call, not a text. The silence was strange at first. Then I realized it wasn't silence. It was surrender. She had nothing left to say that could rewrite the past or soften the truth. But the world around her hadn't stopped whispering. Word had gotten out. Whispers turned to stares, and stares turned to distance. Friends she thought were loyal stopped replying. Invitations dried up. Her name became a warning, not a welcome. One afternoon, Mason forwarded me a message from a mutual acquaintance. "Is it true about Elise and Caleb?" Someone said there's a video. Wild stuff. Never would have guessed. No one ever guesses. That's the nature of betrayal. It hides behind perfect smiles and well-practiced routines. But it always leaks. Always. I found Elise sitting on a bench downtown 2 days later. I hadn't planned to see her, but fate has a cruel sense of humor. She looked thinner, like she was shrinking to match the damage she'd caused. She saw me before I could walk away. "Please," she said, standing. 5 minutes. I almost kept walking, but something in her eyes, exhaustion, maybe shame, made me stop. "Say what you need to say. You can hate me. I deserve it. But what we had, it mattered. I lost myself. I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's the truth." "You didn't just lose yourself," I replied. "You threw me away. You threw us away. For what?" "It wasn't about him," she said quietly. "It was about me." I felt invisible, stuck, like I was performing a role I didn't audition for. "So you burned down the stage?" She nodded. "Yes. And I regret it every second." I looked at her, this woman who once knew every part of me, and I realized something strange. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate requires space in your heart. She didn't live there now. She was a ghost. "I hope you find peace, Elise. But it won't be with me. And it won't be in this city. Not anymore." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. That too was a performance she couldn't pull off anymore. She sat back down, alone. I walked away. And for the first time, my chest didn't feel heavy. The grief was gone. The anger had burned itself out. All that remained was clarity. And the final step in my plan, the one I'd saved for last. Not for destruction. For liberation. For me. The revenge wasn't about pain anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they stole. And giving it back to the only person who never lied to me, myself. I sold the house. Not out of desperation or sadness, but strategy. The home we built had too many ghosts trapped between its walls. I couldn't keep living where every room whispered betrayal. It sold fast, clean records, great location, perfect for a family that hadn't yet been gutted by lies. I packed methodically, leaving nothing Elise had touched. I gave her a deadline to collect anything she claimed was hers. She never showed. I left the rest on the curb, unceremoniously. The new place I bought wasn't flashy. It was sharp, minimal, clean, like starting with a blank sheet of paper instead of erasing an old one. I updated my contact info, my address, my emergency contact, Mason now. I deleted shared cloud accounts, disconnected mutual friends on social media, and closed the bank account Elise and I once used to pay for vacations, bills, and apparently her affair. I changed everything. My life, my rhythm, my peace. One afternoon, I walked past a coffee shop where Elise and I had shared our first kiss. It was just glass now, closed months ago. That felt symbolic. Like the universe had quietly paved over what used to be. And I was fine with that. Caleb? He moved. Vanished, mostly. Word was, he left the state. Mason heard through a former coworker that he was applying for work under a shortened version of his name. Hiding. Good. He'd never really been a man, just a shadow pretending to have substance. Elise emailed me once more. The subject line was one word, closure. I didn't open it. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally didn't need to. The file still sits in my inbox, unopened. Like a glass box I refuse to break just to feel something that's already gone. That weekend, I went hiking alone. I reached the summit by dusk, watched the sun bleed orange across the sky, and sat there for over an hour, just breathing. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for truth, for justice, for pain. I had already faced it all, and survived it. The final piece of my plan was simple. I started writing. Not revenge stories. Not angry blog posts. Just truth. About betrayal. About boundaries. About learning to rebuild after being wrecked. And to my surprise, people listened. My inbox slowly filled with strangers saying, "This happened to me too." And in their stories, I found something Elise and Caleb never had. Purpose. And in that, I found something far more lasting than revenge. I found freedom. A month later, I was invited to speak on a podcast. Small audience. Just a local mental health therapist who had stumbled across one of my essays online. She liked how I wrote about betrayal not as rage, but as a quiet undoing of trust. I nearly said no, but something in me nudged forward. The conversation was raw, unscripted. I talked about the weight of silence, the slow decay of denial, and the difference between moving on and truly healing. I never said names. Never exposed Elise or Caleb. That part was done. But I told the truth. And when the episode aired, it spread faster than expected. People connected with it, DMs poured in. Men, women, all saying the same thing. I thought I was alone. But one message stood out. It was from someone I hadn't seen in over a decade, Leah. My ex before Elise. We'd parted amicably years ago. No betrayal, just different paths. She wrote, "Your voice hasn't changed. It's just stronger now. I'm proud of you." That one hit different. Because it reminded me that there was a version of me before the chaos. Before I became the man standing in the ashes. And he was still in there, after all. We started talking again. Slowly. No flirting. Just real conversations. Long, honest ones. About how love without honesty is just performance. About how we both let people steal pieces of us before learning to guard them properly. Elise found out about the podcast. I know because she left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Just saw the transcription. You're profiting off my pain now? I laughed, because that's what she never understood. This wasn't about pain. It was about truth. She had used silence as a shield. I had turned it into a weapon. Not to hurt, but to protect what mattered. Me. The day I officially closed the joint divorce filing, the court clerk slid me the final stamped copy. You're free, she said without looking up. And it hit me. Not just legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. I was free. No more tracking lies. No more scanning for signs. No more second-guessing what love looked like. I walked out of that courthouse into sunlight that felt earned. And that night, I wrote again. Not about Elise, or Caleb, or what they took, but about who I was rebuilding. The man who doesn't chase revenge anymore, because he already lived it. And now, he was chasing nothing but peace. Elise moved out of state not long after the court finalized everything. I found out through Mason, who heard from a friend of a friend that she was starting over in Oregon. The phrase felt strange, like starting over was something you earned by surviving hardship, not something you claimed after causing it. But I didn't dwell on it. I didn't care where she went, because she couldn't escape what she'd become. And neither could Caleb. His professional exile had stuck. He tried launching a freelance consulting firm, but with his name burned in the quiet corners of every local industry circle, clients were hesitant. Eventually, the site went dark. His digital footprint faded. That was fitting. Shadows tend to disappear under enough light. Meanwhile, I found rhythm again. I'd wake early, make strong coffee, and write for 2 hours before checking emails or touching my phone. I ran in the mornings. Not to escape, but to move forward. Leah and I kept talking. She sent me a book once, inscribed with, "Not all wounds are meant to stay open." We weren't dating. We weren't anything. But somehow, in the quiet moments of our exchanges, there was healing. Not because she was saving me, but because she reminded me that not every woman needed to be distrusted, decoded, or dismantled before being let in. One evening, I walked past a restaurant Elise and I used to frequent. A couple sat outside, laughing in sync over some private joke, hands reaching across the table without hesitation. It didn't make me angry. It didn't make me sad. It made me smile. Not because I missed it, but because I remembered how much that used to mean to me, and that I was finally capable of wanting it again. Not with her. Not with the past, but with someone who'd meet me at the table with nothing to hide. The final act of revenge was never destruction. It was reconstruction. Because the greatest punishment for people like Elise and Caleb isn't the collapse of their lives. It's watching the person they betrayed build a better life without them. One they'll never be invited into again. I didn't destroy them. I exposed them. And then I left them to rot in the truth. Now I live in mine. 6 months passed before I saw Elise again. Not in person, on a screen. A video clip shared by a friend who didn't know our history. She was speaking at a panel for Women in Transition, wearing a soft blue blazer, talking about learning through mistakes and finding identity after loss. I watched it twice. Not out of curiosity, but because I was trying to find the version of her I used to know. She wasn't there. The Elise on that stage was polished, calm, practiced. Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't betray emotion. She was rehearsed redemption. And I realized then, she hadn't changed. She just rebranded. That's the thing about people like Elise. They don't rebuild. They repurpose. She wasn't sorry. She was simply adapting her story to survive. I didn't feel anger. I felt detachment. Like I was watching a stranger tell someone else's story. Meanwhile, mine was still unfolding privately, honestly, painfully real. I kept writing. Substack subscribers grew into the thousands. People connected with what I had to say because it wasn't sugar-coated or self-pitying. It was raw, unfiltered. A man bleeding on the page without asking to be rescued. That's what made it real. And real is rare. Leah finally visited. She flew in one weekend and stayed in a guest room I made sure had new sheets, fresh flowers, and a note that said, "You don't know me anything. Just your honesty." We walked the city, talked until 2 a.m. about life before betrayal and what comes after. She didn't try to fix me, and I didn't try to impress her. We just were. That night, she looked at me and said, "You feel lighter now." I nodded. Because I finally dropped the weight that wasn't mine. She didn't kiss me. She just squeezed my hand. It was enough. That's what healing actually looks like. Not fireworks. Not epiphanies. Just someone who stays in the quiet and doesn't run from your scars. I checked the old flash drive one last time before deleting it. The folder. The footage. The timeline. All gone. I didn't need it anymore. I'd kept it as proof, as power, as memory. But I had already won. And holding on to the ruins was just keeping the smoke alive. Now, I wanted clean air. Elise could have her stage. Caleb could have his silence. I had something they'd never get back. A soul that had walked through hell and come out honest. And that was enough. Then came the email that reignited everything. Not from Elise. Not from Caleb. From a journalist. Subject line: private inquiry regarding internal misconduct at LNR Marketing, confidential. I almost deleted it. But I opened it. Inside, a reporter explained they were investigating a pattern of ethical breaches tied to client manipulation and hidden relationships within corporate leadership. Caleb's name was one of several that came up. They had heard whispers. My name surfaced in relation to the anonymous case study presented at the industry ethics seminar months prior. We believe you may have insights or evidence related to the collapse of Caleb Donovan's consultancy. Would you be willing to speak off the record? I sat back in my chair, arms crossed. It would have been so easy to ignore it. But then I thought, why should I? Caleb had buried too many things, Elise included. And now, he was trying to rebuild quietly as if none of it had happened. But ghosts don't stay buried when someone finally digs. I agreed to speak. Carefully. I gave only facts. Timelines. Descriptions of patterns. I never framed myself as a victim, just a witness. The journalist was sharp, thorough, and respectful. 2 weeks later, the story went live. It was titled, The Invisible Decay, When Influence Outpaces Integrity. Caleb's name was there. So was Elise's, briefly buried in a paragraph about conflicts of interest and inappropriate use of professional access. The piece wasn't viral, but it was real, and real spreads. Comments poured in. Colleagues, former employees, people who had been burned by both of them in ways I'd never known. Stories of lost promotions, stolen clients, emotional manipulation behind closed doors. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. I hadn't been their only casualty, just the one who refused to stay quiet. Elise called. Again. This time, I answered. You couldn't just let it go? She asked, voice low, almost shaking. You stood on a stage and turned your guilt into a brand, I said. Did you really think the truth wouldn't find its way back? I lost everything. No, I replied. You finally had to face everything. Are you proud of yourself? No, I'm just not ashamed anymore. And then I hung up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I was simply done. Public exposure wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about balance. She had controlled the narrative for so long, twisting it into redemption. Now the truth stood beside her like a mirror she couldn't turn away from. And me? I slept better that night than I had in years. Because now the world finally saw what I had always known. And there was nothing left for them to hide behind. The world knowing was never the goal, it was the closure I never thought I'd get. But the true revenge? That still waited quietly. It wasn't destruction anymore. It was precision. A goodbye that echoed. A strike wrapped in grace. I waited 3 more weeks, until the noise around the article died down, until the whispers faded into silence and Elise thought she could start stitching her image back together. Then, I made one final move. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. A goodbye dressed as legacy. I printed the truth. Not the article. Not the videos. My truth. The story. The betrayal. The emotional fallout. Every piece written under a pseudonym I had already grown a loyal audience behind. One known for raw truth, for being painfully human. My followers had been begging for the story behind the scars. So I gave it to them. Renamed. Masked. But clear. A husband. A wife. A best friend. A 10-year marriage reduced to ashes and rebuilt on hard-earned healing. I published it as a short book. Quietly. Independently. I didn't advertise. Didn't send it to Elise. I didn't need to. Because stories travel. They find ears. They always do. And within weeks, readers were talking. Sharing. Quoting it. The raw pain. The quiet strength. The fallout. The forgiveness withheld. Then one day, Mason texted. Elise read it. I called him. She knows. She knows. And she's not okay. I didn't write it for her. I know. But it found her anyway. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded. Good. Because this was the kind of revenge she never saw coming. Not a scandal. Not a confrontation. A truth so gently told that she couldn't deny it, but so widely spread that she could never escape it. She called me one last time. I answered. I know you wrote it, she said. I know. You made me into a story. You were a story, I replied. And now, so am I. The one who survived it. Silence. Then, do you still hate me? No, I said. Hate is for people who still live in your head. You don't anymore. You really think you won? I didn't win. I healed. She hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. And that night, I poured a drink, walked out onto my new balcony, and watched the lights of the city blink like quiet applause. Not for revenge, but for finally being free.